So, I've been banging the drum about a book called Infinitely Full of Hope by Tom Whyman. It's this simultaneous work of memoir and philosophy that explores a really important and often neglected philosophical question. Whyman is working with German philosopher Immanuel Kant here, who, in his critique of pure reason, outlines the interests of said reason in the form of three questions. What can I know? What ought I do? And the question of importance to Wyman's book, what can I hope for? He takes a really interesting route through this question, I'd say. He works with various definitions of hope and happiness, borrowing from some of my favorite writers, including Jean Rhys, Franz Kafka, Theodor Adorno, and he and his partner's eventually successful attempts to conceive a child, using all of this to try and find hope in an age of financial crisis and impending climate catastrophe. Some remarkable shit. I'm struck by the end of this story, sorry to spoil your book, Tom, where after the birth of their son, Whyman uses this sort of ecstatic and joyful moment to discuss how hope for a better future necessitates reaching beyond our atomized selves. To truly be hopeful, we must be able to recognize some good which transcends our own discrete self-interest in being invested in the interests of future generations in whatever capacity, whether it be as a parent or a grandparent or a godparent or an aunt or an uncle or a teacher or a campaigner or an artist or a friend, is one, perhaps the most readily available, direct, partial way we have of realizing this transcendent good imminently in the world. Well, goddamn, Tom. I mean, the whole of Wyman's book, it contains these prefigurative moments of struggle and anticipation in becoming a father. This is all in and of itself a very powerful lesson, a testament to the clarity that emerges in hope despite doubt. I find this both quite moving and useful for a number of reasons, but I keep returning to this idea that the hope for a better future comes from this kind of recognition of oneself in the gaze of another, how the sense of, to get a little Heideggerian, being in the world has almost immeasurable effect on our subjectivity, and how these points of recognition cannot exist in any kind of social vacuum. When one looks at their child, or someone in their care, a friend, a loved one, a coworker, they see a gaze peering back at them. And this kind of thing has a tendency to usher in huge points of growth and change for individual people. For Whyman, the commitments to his partner, to his future child, are in some ways inextricable from the potential for hope in crisis. Remarkable here is the way that formative experience, the working through doubt and struggle for something greater, are directly correlated to new potentials. If I myself cannot realize the hope for a better future, perhaps might I engender this in my children. There is this humanistic, almost this kind of modern stoic sense of duty here, similar to what Whyman is trying to do when doing a small revision to some of Kant's work, considering our contemporary, more secular society. Because the idea is the commitment to hope is something much greater than things as they are. It's the acceptance of the necessary and honestly very noble duty to build a better world after recognizing how very small we are. Despite everything, the world remains full of hope, infinitely so. Just maybe not for us. Been reading and writing a lot about what it means to be a worker, publishers, I'm trying to write a book, and how solidarity might function as a figurative, subjective experience, one that offers clarity into that which cannot be on its own. What happens to us when we experience a group of workers taking action in defense of themselves, in defense of others, in defense of me, despite any potential harm to their own well-being? I am always not myself as one substance, that being me, but the result of these processes, plural, in my social relationships, my experiences that serve as active feedback for my ever-changing perception of who I really am. Solidarity is an experience that affirms me in a fundamental absence, that I alone cannot achieve the change that I hope for. And it is in this profoundly humbling experience that I can better know myself, because I recognize my own contradictions, my own absences, the lack within myself. This is what the poet Walt Whitman meant when he spoke to the reader of Leaves of Grass and said, "Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." The recognition and commitment to solidarity is a process by which we realize change in both our social environments as well as ourselves. It's the key to not just the production of class consciousness, but perhaps also to the hope that so many of us seek.
We should all search our hearts and our souls for the courage and the clarity of spirit to go to the White House, to go to the Oakland terminal on June 22nd, to go to Vietnam if we could and stand in front of the flamethrowers and say, "If blood must be spilled, let it be mine rather than the blood of Vietnamese children. If you need someone to search and destroy, let me save you the trouble. Here I am."
So, as I noted a little bit ago, I've been writing a lot about the formation of class consciousness and how things like change, growth, and the working through of difficult circumstances do not emerge from within an atomized self, but perhaps from a more humanistic duty that is in many ways noble unto its own sake. Noble in the ways that it disrupts the social world on behalf of the working classes, and a duty via its contribution to new formations in that social world. For Whyman's book, the social formation of the family becomes a vehicle for something much bigger than personal relationships and personal growth. It is a representation of solidarity as duty, how the recognition in our social relationships are means through which hope manifests both despite and because of our own insufficiency. How the practice of a noble cause born from the needs of another might not fix everything now, how it might not fix everything tomorrow, but maybe that we might find hope through the recognition in solidarity. When worker stands beside worker, worker sees worker. I know that as I've grown older and entered into new parts of my life, a lot of new opportunities, a time of growth and change, I've done the cliched but largely worthwhile thing and sort of returned to the well of my personal worldview, so to speak, which, means, as usual, just a lot of spare reading. But I've been poring over the work of Stoughton Lynd in particular. And he's an American historian, a labor attorney, a socialist, a conscientious objector, a civil rights activist, and Quaker who spent most of his life standing alongside and in defense of workers. He did this as a teacher in the freedom schools, in his opposition to the war in Vietnam, and through his legal and written work. His many personal, oral histories that allow workers to recount their own lived experiences. I can't discount his brilliant wife, Alice, here. You can see her and Stoughton's labor on these oral history projects in the volume Rank and File. That's out in a paperback with Haymarket Books. I highly recommend it. Through his work, Lynd showed me how my role as an historian, and especially as an historian of labor, it doesn't stop at the water's edge of struggle. Labor history, public history, oral testimony of historical events, these can engender some of the values that Whyman was talking about in his book, and thus, maybe, despite everything, inspire hope, infinitely so. So I'm pretty sure it's patently obvious to anyone who's watching this and who knows me even a little bit that I profoundly admire Lynd for his dutiful advocacy and solidarity with the spectrum of marginalized underclasses across contemporary capitalism, and I hope to, in some small way, do justice to his legacy through my own work. And like him and so many other historians of the working classes, my emphasis on this way of writing history is indebted to the commitment, the duty, if you will, to recognize not just the stories of workers as historically significant, but the struggle of workers as historically significant. This is something that requires seeking out their stories and standing beside them in a very particular way. It's about accounting for the points of contingency and mediation that have significant effects on their lives while demonstrating how their conditions offer a vehicle for change. For myself, labor history helps me connect the solidarity of trade union organizing with the documenting of that same organizing. For Stoughton and Alice Lind, in a dutiful advocacy on behalf of those who needed it the most, without expectations of anything in return, they built a platform on which the lived experiences of a spectrum of workers could birth new histories through their testimony. Their story, remarkable as it is, cannot stand on its own. Their story is of and by a commitment to working class solidarity. The links between class, civil advocacy, and history become plain as day, and the weight and power of workers' testimony allows us to bear some witness to their struggle and potentially take that struggle up as our own. The recognition in oral history, the commitment to making a better world for others, breeds solidarity. The kind of solidarity that feels so universal that you can almost reach out and grab it as you read it. It's this thing that's best described by a great organizer I know who once said, when I announced some good news in this unfair labor practice charges we had filed, "I'm going to be chasing this dragon for the rest of my life, aren't I?" Well said, Travis, well said. As someone who has given oral history testimony after standing in solidarity with workers, I can say that my own experiences, both in the act of solidarity itself, as well as in the recognition of these small gestures as historically significant and worthy of record, thank you to my friend Dan, has served as affirmation of a few strongly held truths that I've come to know. In my own life, actualization and affirmation of the self has come through a recognition of my fundamental absence, an inability to make change on my own. Points of reflection where I can say to myself that I did something, I stood for something without expectations of something in return. I found within myself this new hope for a better future for someone else, and this emerged from a recognition of that which I am not, more than the sum total of myself plus the people around me. What power this has brought to me and to others, and what incredible change solidarity has made in my life. I think of the organizers, the former workers at the Dandelion Community Cafe and the union they fought so hard to form. I think of my own co-workers and my own union as I've organized my own workplace and helped others do the same. They have all shown me what I am capable of when I'm no longer standing alone, and how the figurative experiences of working class solidarity, combined with a commitment to the lives of others, gives me the tool necessary to become something so much greater than myself. I feel intimately connected to both these moments and histories similar to these. I feel connected to points of rupture in the dominant economic and social orders, where we see the emergence of class consciousness that stems from the unyielding strength in a simple recognition that I lack the power to alone make the change I want to see. Standing together against impossible odds, where even when we fall down, only to get back up again, we can feel less alone. We know where to go and what to do to feel less lonely, even if only for a moment, because I am who I am, because I am who I am not. The self is more fully formed by recognizing in another what it lacks. People ask me how I can remain optimistic about a better future for workers despite all the abject ugliness in the world, and this is my answer. The recognition and absence, class experience that showed me both who I am and what I'm capable of when I acknowledge my own insufficiencies as an atomized individual and commit myself to a larger project of social change. Solidarity, this is what, despite incredible odds, this is what has made me so infinitely, magnificently full of hope.